I always knew that I was different growing up. My family were very liberal and very down to earth, but it was still very wrong and it was very taboo to be gay. I just broke free, honestly. I just had the best night. We ended up in Soho and lots of different bars and clubs. And I just remember like singing, "I'm coming out. I want the world to," and it was the best feeling ever. I'm pausing my life and my happiness for what? Because you're embarrassed that your son is gay? Well, that's your problem. And you're my mum and I love you, but it's done. And we didn't speak for years with my mum. When I did become authentically myself was when I met my husband.
Hello and welcome back to the queerest podcast telling the fiercest stories. This is Queer Talker. I'm your host, Ben Cicchetti, and this week I sit down with Ali Najjar, whose love story and wedding to his husband Adam earned them the Attitude Pride Award in 2024. But before we get to that, I've got a favour to ask. Wherever you are listening to this episode, hit that subscribe button. It's a quick click that will make a massive difference. And in return, I promise to keep bringing you the boldest and queerest stories every single time. But now, let's get into it with my conversation with Ali. I believe to understand an LGBTQ plus person as an adult, you first need to learn about them as a young person. So, what should I know about you as a child or a teenager to understand the Ali that sits in front of me today?
So I come from a very large family. So I was born to my mum and my dad, my sister. My dad is one of 12 and my mum was one of 6. So that's like what, 12, 15, 16, 17 aunties and uncles.
Yeah.
They're all married, so they're all double. I've got 58 first cousins. So it was a very, very busy time in my family growing up. I always knew that I was different growing up. When we would all get together, I would always hang out with the female cousins. I would always run to their Barbies and pull out Barbie and Ken. And the boy cousins would sit there with this horrible big green and brown car, like smashing up to pieces. I was thinking, why playing with that horrible car? Why playing with my pink convertible over here with Ken? And obviously, Barbie, and yeah, that was me. So I always knew I was different. The family always knew that I was different as well. Um, yeah, I mean, I came from a very loving family, so I'm half Turkish, half Palestinian. We are Muslims. We're not liberal. My family were not liberal at all. I mean, they weren't practicing Muslims, but they would do once a year they would fast. Certain family members. Other ones would take the mick and say, you're not fasting today. They go, of course I am. I fast in my sleep. Make jokes about it. So, but it was a very happy, loving family that I grew up in. And yeah, I have some very lovely memories growing up with my family.
I love that. That's amazing. So take yourself back to that time as a young person. Do you remember the first LGBTQ plus person you became aware of, either in real life or through media?
So I do. So growing up, so I was born in 1981, so an 80s child, and it was it was very different then growing up but what we see today and what we saw back then, two very different things. And I remember a family friend of my mum and my aunties, and his name was John, and he was black and he was gay and he was very, very, very flamboyant. And I remember um, when we would have like parties and John would come, and it became like the joke of the party, if that makes sense, because it was, like I say, it was very different being in the 80s and the 90s and
Mm.
being gay and being flamboyant, and you know people just didn't understand, and they thought he was like, me looking back now, was like the joker of that, and the inappropriate questions that would get asked. and the sniggering, the laughing, the taking the piss out of him. And I remember my mum, my dad, aunties, uncles, I remember that they would pull people aside and tell them to stop, and they would be like, you don't do that, And I just remember, and he was always so lovely, and I remember connecting with him a lot and thinking, you are different. And I saw myself in him, if that makes sense, because I knew I was different. And as I soon got older, I then soon was like, well, yeah, we were, you know, I connected with you because you were gay and I am gay. But back then I was obviously young as a child, so I didn't really know, but I connected with him. And, unfortunately, John ended up having a mental breakdown. And he ended up suffering with bipolar and a lot of got sectioned. I remember was in and out of hospital. And I think a lot of that took onto his mental health, the way he was treated. And, I think being gay and coming out as gay in normal circumstances, it's hard enough for anyone being gay, trans, lesbian. But when you then throw race and religion and mix and in the mix of it all, we've got that many more barriers and layers that we then have to deal with because, unfortunately, you know, people from an ethnic background, and when you've got religion, they don't seem to understand because that level of acceptance is not there.
Right.
So I remember that with John, and I remember it being really sad, and it really breaks my heart now. And I still drive past his road sometimes when I go to visit family members, and every time I drive past his road, honestly, it brings a lump to my throat and a tear to my eye because I just remember how he was treated and where he ended up, all because he was gay, and just how society was back in the 80s. And I just remembered as I grew up, and just remembering all those comments that were pushed onto him was then getting pushed onto me.
Yeah.
I thought I'm not going to have that. I'm not going to end up having a breakdown. I'm not going to. I'm going to need to fight this, and it was it was a fight. Then it was really really hard. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, he was for the time trying to live and be as authentic as he possibly could be. And obviously the pressure and the mental pressure of not being able to live authentically, not being able to kind of live your truth. We know what kind of impact that can have on you, and clearly the impact it had on him. For yourself, when do you think you first felt authentically yourself? And then when did you feel you could bring that authenticity to the world, which is obviously kind of the next step in that kind of authenticity journey?
So I I would say it was in the early noughties. So when I got my first job, and when I first got my one of my jobs, I started working in like the late 90s. But in this particular job, I remember I went in and I made up this made up girlfriend, and because I was like from my previous jobs and the previous issues that I had experienced, and I thought, well, if I just make up my girlfriend, then I can maybe try and bypass that. But unfortunately, Barbie and Ken were still there in the background with me, and I could see people sniggering and laughing when I would talk about my girlfriend. So I remember my boss was gay, and there was a lot of LGBTQ people working within the company. And I just remember they took me out one night, and I just remember I just broke free, honestly. It was like letting a kid loose in a sweet shop. I just had the best night. We ended up in Soho and lots of different bars and clubs, and we ended up. I was out to about 3, 4 in the morning. And I just remember like singing, "I'm coming out.
There you go.
I won't go well too," and it was the best feeling ever. But again, that was me being authentically myself around certain people, not out to my family, because I had the role of living two separate lives. I had to be Ali, uh, the family boy. As I say, my family were very liberal and very down to earth, but it was still very wrong and it was very taboo to be gay. And just the way that was talked about wasn't talked about, the advert, so I had to start living two separate lives, which was very difficult because, as I said, I had the one with my family and then I had the real Ali where I could authentically be myself, but not to the fullest. Um, when I did become authentically myself was when I met my husband. And I had been there before too many times where, I had relationships that had broken down because I was part of their life but they were part of my life. And I look back now and I think, like I couldn't imagine not being part of Adam's family and his life. And I couldn't imagine Adam not being part of my family and my life. So, I can only apologize to, um, my exes that had to kind of part with that. There was no choice. There was no discussion. I didn't give them it was this is how it is and that's it. And my longest relationship with one of my exes was nearly just over 4 years. And I look back now and think, wow, I'm sorry that you had to kind of put up with that. That wasn't your issue. That was my issue. And but yeah, but when I met my husband, I thought, do you know what? He's the one. He's got my heart. I'm coming all out now,
Yeah.
and there's no stopping me. And here I am.
Yeah. Never looked back. Yeah. It's funny, those stories of, I can remember being at work and doing the whole fake girlfriend thing. And I can remember getting a phone call from who was actually at the time my boyfriend. And kind of then one of my colleagues saying, "Oh, who was that?" And I said, "Oh, it was my girlfriend." And they were like, "Oh, it sounded like a boy's voice." And I was like, "Oh, no idea." And you kind of quickly skirt away from the conversation
Yeah,
because you
exactly.
realize you've
Yeah.
very clearly been caught in the lie there. One thing you touched on there, and one thing that really hit me when we caught up a little bit before recording this podcast, was your connection to your mum. Let's start with that connection when you were younger. What role and impression did your mum leave on you at a young age?
I mean, look, growing up with my mum, she was the one of the most glamorous women that I've ever come across. I mean, I'm talking 80s, I'm talking big permed hair, I'm talking big shoulder pads, I'm talking makeup, high heels, the leggings, the perfumes, the nails. She was like a catwalk model. She was glamorous, my mum, and I was so obsessed with her and I loved her. And, you know, I just had this great bond and connection with my mum. And I just used to think, wow, I want to be you. I love you. I want to be you. Like, you're so glamorous. And I would get her dresses and heels and prance around the living room. And, every year, like clockwork, wait for Mariah Carey, All I Want for Christmas. Because back then,
There you go.
it was just radios, MTV. You had to wait for the song to come on and stand there and add to the VHS tapes. You quick record. And then if you didn't, I don't know if you remember on the VHS tapes, but there was a little hole at the left or right hand side. If you didn't
Yeah.
cover that hole, it wouldn't record. I think that, but that, it was that was it with my mum, and that relationship was there. It was, this love connection between me and my mum that soon broke down. Soon broke down because as I got older, um, you know, and my mum found out that I was gay. And honestly, it was like a bloody EastEnders episode. It was the night before my sister's wedding, and I went to pick up my sister's wedding dress with my sister, and I left my phone at home. And this is talking in 2004, I think all this happened. And got a text on my phone that pinged up. Mum saw the message, and started putting two and two together. And you know, and at this point, I was in my mid 20s. In my 20s, I'd never brought a girlfriend home apart from the imaginary one, you know. And so Mum saw this message night before my sister's wedding, and I just remember the wedding day. The next day, she was very, very withdrawn, and wasn't engaging, and it looked like she had something on her mind. And we're like, Mum, what's wrong? What's wrong? And anyway, fast forward a couple months later, and it was Valentine's Day, and I came home after I'd been out with another friend of mine who was probably my mum's age, and she was, we were just friends. So got home, and Mum was like, "How was your night?" I was like, "Yeah, it was good." I took Anne out. I was her Valentine, and she was mine tonight. And then Mum then started asking the questions, and she's like, "Well, why aren't you taking?" you know, someone at your own age? Why are you hanging around with someone my age? And look at all of your other cousins, they're taking out this and they've got girlfriends. And I always said to myself, if mum ever asks me, I'm going to put the question back to her and say, well, why do you think? And that's exactly what I did. Why do you think, mum? And she went around every single possible reason till she got to the last one. So, and do you like men, or are you gay, or do you like men? And I said yes, I do. And that was a hard pill for my mum to swallow. I remember she was very upset, um, and she cried. I remember I got a bottle of Bacardi and poured us a drink. Well, she didn't drink it. I think I drank hers as well because I was shaking like that. It's really fearful. I don't think people, if some people think really, like I just tell mom and dad over a breakfast one morning. I was like, well, good for you. I'm glad that you didn't have that
Yeah.
experience that I and other people have had, because it's horrible. Because after that, then that relationship with my mum, as I said, broke down.
Yeah.
It was years of tears, tantrums, secrets, and lies, and not accepting. And it was really difficult. It was a really, really difficult period in my life. It still is sometimes now. I mean, don't get me wrong, my mum is fully accept, she fully accepts me. It took her years to accept my relationship with Adam. When I
Yeah.
eventually came out and was like, I'm not hiding this, because I've had enough of hiding of who I am. My life is on hold here. I'm pausing my life and my happiness. For what? Because you're embarrassed that your son is gay? Well, that's your problem. And you're my mum and I love you, but it's done. And we didn't speak for years with my mum. I lost out a lot of time with my mum. And no child parent should miss out with their parent. I lost my dad in 2011. He was 56 when my dad died. And my dad loved me to bits. He just always saw the funny side in me, because I was always quite the comical one at home, prancing around, dancing around, singing, and all of the crazy stories I would tell him. And he just was fascinated and just used to always say, just please be safe. I
Yeah.
never came out to my dad, but my dad, as a man, knew his son was gay. I
Yeah.
was 30 when my dad died. I never brought a girlfriend home. So, I mean, look, I don't know which way it would have gone if my dad was still alive. I still would have come out. I still would have lived my life. Um, and I'm sure it would have been much more hard work, but, you know, I didn't have that. My dad died,
Yeah.
but I had my mum, and trust me, she put her stamp down. And as I said, we went through the wars, you know. It took a long time, even up to that wedding. A week before the wedding, she was tossing and turning and humming. And I was like, do you know what, mum? Do you know actually what, mum? don't come. You are not
Yeah.
invited. Don't come to it. This is mine and Adam's wedding. This is our special day. This is our big day. You know, we've put up with this for years. Are you going to come and make us feel uncomfortable on our wedding day? Don't come, because we have invested far too much time in planning this wedding and having the people that we want there to celebrate our love. And it really shouldn't matter anymore at this point, Mum, because you know what? I'm 42, you know, I'm probably through halfway of my life at the moment, Mum. So I think you just need to just stop it. And do you know what, Ben? She was the first one there. She was the first one on the dance floor, and she was the last one off the dance floor. Like, you know, and I I feel like we kind of got that connection back again, and you know, and she loves Adam. You know, we got there,
Yeah.
and it was a lot of
Yeah.
hard work and tears, but hey, you know, it was worth it in the end. Yeah,
Yeah, to mend that bridge fully and kind of have her fully in your full life, right? Like not having to hide parts of your life and have her kind of fully be involved, love Adam the way
yeah,
she clearly does, is incredibly important. And obviously, one of the things you touched on very early on was the 80s. And as a person that kind of grew up through the 80s, and it's an experience. I was born in 86, so I kind of missed the 80s by the time I was kind of conscious I was into the 90s. And so the only way I can really experience the queer community in the 80s is through documentaries or shows like It's a Sin, which was obviously a fantastic show a few years ago. Talk to me about that experience of growing up in the 80s and kind of queer culture at the time as much as you kind of got exposed to it.
growing up in the 80s, I'll start off me being at school. And I remember being at school being very different, and I remember kids being very mean to me. Very, very mean to me at school. Then remember going into secondary school where it gets bigger and you've got the bigger kids. You're a little tadpole. You've got the bigger fish, and you're navigating your way through and thinking, "Oh God, what is going on?" And you know, I know I'm different. I know it's wrong because that's all I've been told in the 80s and early 90s. I've seen the TV adverts about HIV and AIDS, and it's all around gay people. Freddie Mercury's died at this point, and I remember that clearly like yesterday. And all of these things are now rummaging through my little brain at the age of 11, thinking, God, I'm different. I like boys. I'm going to get AIDS. I'm going to die. It's taboo. It's not talked about. I grew up in Section 28. There was nothing at school about it then. It was just you. And then obviously I got my family. That's not talked about. I've got friends, people at school now bullying me for being different. It was really hard. It was a really hard time, and there was nobody there whatsoever through my young days growing up. And I also had that additional. I couldn't even go home and tell my parents that I
Yeah.
was being bullied because what am I going to say to them? Mum, Dad, I'm being bullied because I'm camp, because I'm gay,
Yeah.
because people are calling me a girl, people are spitting at me, people are punching me, people are kicking me, you know, people are throwing bags of chips on my head. I would leave school. I would leave school at like 3 o'clock when we finished at 3:15 to run to get the bus home because I didn't want to see them. Like it was a really difficult, challenging time, and I feel like I didn't get a full education at school because I was so worried every day, having that feeling in my stomach to go to school, knowing that I was going to get, well, I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
Day by day was a different situation, Ben. Some days it would be fine, but a majority of the time I was, they used to wipe the floor with me, and not just one, not just two, everyone. You know,
Yeah.
it was horrible. And I remember recently, and I was thinking about this and thinking about what um we talked about last time, and I remember there was so-called friends at school. And they gave me a nickname. And the nickname they gave me was Piff. Hi, Piff. How you doing, Piff? You're right, Piff. And I just thought, well, that's a funny nickname. Not even realizing that as I got older, thinking, Piff, you b you were calling me a puff the whole time.
Yeah.
Hi, Puff. Hi, Puff.
Yeah.
And I literally was so upset because for years they were meant to be my mates.
Yeah.
They weren't my mates. I was just, it was just, another a funny name to disrespect a queer person, and it's some light entertainment for them. Um, and I really, 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 urge people now to teach your kids differently
Yeah.
because there are lots of young queer kids at school now. We're not going anywhere. It's part of life. It's part of society. Please teach your children to respect others and to let them be who they want to be rather than tormenting them in their safe space at school, which should be a safe space for a child, you know, because you don't know what their background is. As I said, I couldn't go home and tell my parents I was being bullied because that would open a whole another can of worms for me. My
Yeah.
deepest, darkest secret that I didn't want out, and I was being punished for it, and I was in this way. I didn't even know what was going on. It was pretty bad,
Yeah.
But as I got older, and then I remember, um, we're in like the 90s now, late 90s, and I got my first job. Oh, I got my first job, and I remember pulling out a Vaseline. I've got one now actually next to me because I get dry lips, like my love Vaseline. But back then there was these big tubs. I don't know if you remember them, but these big tubs of Vaseline, and that's all I had. And it was winter. I mean, obviously I wasn't going to use a whole tub of Vaseline in one day, but I brought the Vaseline with me to work in my bag, as you do. And I remember, and I took it out and I put it on my desk, and someone said, I didn't know you was going to Hampstead Heath after work. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And I was sat there working. And I was like, what? And there's like, and you could see everyone laughing and giggling. And you could hear the comments, oh, are you a taker or are you a receiver or are you a giver or are
Mm.
you a... And I was like, and I was only young. This was like in 97. And I remember another colleague came over and was like, Ali, put your Vaseline away. They think you're going to have to teach to get bummed after work. And I was just, oh my God, I was mortified. And I was like, what? No, I'm not. And they're all laughing. And I just remember that. And I was saying, no, it's for my lips. And they're like, you need it for your lips, do
Yeah.
you? And I just was like, this is just what is happening here? Like, what is going on? So, even back then in the work system, they didn't protect you. They joined in. They laughed at you. You know, they took the piss out of you. They would, you were again. So, I've now had the school years of being their
Mm.
entertainment. I've now gone through the school years with all of this. I've now got to work in, and I had to re-educate myself because I left school with minimal grades because of how I was treated at school, and no one helped protected me at school. And now I'm in my working life, and now I'm going through it all over again. This time with adults. This time with adults, and I'm thinking, oh my God. And then fast forward again after that, and it was my second job, and I I was 19 at the time. Yeah, I think I was 19. And I was working in a training organization. in North London, and I was also doing not an apprenticeship back then. I can't remember what they were called, but it was some work qualification. Because as I said, I had to re-educate myself because of what I'd been through. And I had to go to head office because that's where I was going to meet my assessor. And so drove up there and I went round the back and there was a big building and the car park was at the back and it was the bottom was all offices like with big doors and there was one member of staff who I knew was gay. His name was Jim, much older than me. And I remember I parked my car and thought I'm just going to go through his little bit. I would normally say hello to him and wave at him when I'm there and go in and, all very, very innocent, like, And I went in and I'll never forget, it was a hot day. Went in and had a little chat. And to go through upstairs, you had to kind of come out of his door and it was like a fire exit to go through, up the fire exit up the back. And I just remember going in, saying hello to him, and then going through the fire exit to go up. And as I went through, I just remember getting pinned, him coming in, pinned me up, and I got sexually assaulted. And I just remember I just froze, and I just remember
Yeah.
having this on me, and I just kept pushing and just kept saying no, no. And eventually I did get him off me, and I mean, my legs were like jelly at this point.
Yeah.
I was, I just burst into this sweat. I can't even do, my hands were clammy. And when you're trying to run and you can't run, and like when you're in a dream and you're trying to run and you can't run and you wake up and you just scream in the end because it was like this nightmare. And I just think, what just happened?
Mm.
And again, I wasn't out. I couldn't tell anybody. It was this secret. I had just been sexually assaulted. I was a child, essentially. Yes, I was 19, an adult, but people, again, don't know your background.
Yeah.
And I was young and I had nobody to turn to, no one to turn to. I couldn't tell my parents. I couldn't tell my sister. I wasn't out to anybody else at this point. It was, it was horrendous. And I just remember eventually, weeks later, I told a colleague at work, but I didn't, it wasn't, oh, I've been sexually assaulted. I know that now, but I told her what had happened and how scared I was and how frightened I was and what he had done. And she said, have you told anyone? And I said, no, I can't. Who do you want me to tell? Who would you like me to tell? Like, it's really embarrassing. That was the words I was using because, so she then told the centre manager. The centre manager then told head office. I remember getting called into a meeting. And you know what, Ben? They they blamed me. They turned it around on me. And he got a talking to. He must have, but he was, and I was, and they're like, are you sure this happened? And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, what do you mean, am I sure? I'm telling you, this is what happened. And I was not believed. And that could have been a girl,
Yeah.
could have been anybody else. That could have been a much worse. Someone could have been raped. Like, but regardless of that, if someone puts their hands on you and starts kissing you when you're 19 and they're 40, nearly 50, I think it was cool, it was old. That's not acceptable. And to then be blamed for it and then not know my whole full background. So years later, I decided to go back to the company and confront the CEO. And her name was
Interesting.
Jeanette. And I
Okay.
went to reception and I pulled up and I walked in and I said, and it was still the same receptionist. I said, I'm here to see Jeanette. She said, oh, you don't have an appointment. I said, no, I don't, but I want to see Jeanette right now. And I need to talk to her. And it was a few all back and forth. I said, I'm not leaving until Jeanette comes down. And Jeanette did come down. And we went into a room and I told her, do you remember, Jeanette, what you told me? and that conversation we had. And I was not out. I had no one to turn to at that point. I couldn't talk to anybody. And then on top of that, you blamed me. So if that happened to a female member of staff, Jeanette, and she came to you saying, I've been sexually assaulted by a man, are you going to throw the blame on the victim to protect your company name and protect you? She was gobsmacked that I came down.
Yeah.
She really didn't have much to say. Um, and I just, the way the reason I did that is for them to reflect years later that they can actually, if they want to be CEOs and they want to run these big organizations or go on to the next corporate organization, then you bring that with you as well. And you realize that sexual assault is sexual assault, whether you are male or female, gay, straight, trans, non binary. If someone says no, or if you just pounce on someone without their consent, it is sexual assault. And especially when you're a young 19-year-old and you have, as I've said, I had no one to turn to. I could have turned, like, if I wasn't strong enough, people can turn to all sorts of things
Yeah.
to escape what's happened. Suicide, drugs, alcohol, like the list goes on. Do people not think of the repercussions? And they don't. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are kind of horrible, not kind of, those are horrible experiences to have gone through. And I think one of the things that stood out is the dangers of not feeling comfortable coming out and not having that, whether it's your family, whether it's your chosen family, whether it's your friends, not having that safety. Because to your point, you were unsafe and unhappy at school and you couldn't escape that at home. You were unsafe and unhappy at work and the quote unquote butt of the joke, and you couldn't escape that at home. And so it really, to me, talks to, thankfully for a lot of us as gay and lesbian and bisexual people, we've managed to find a safer space as that part of the community. But I think as I think about how trans and non-binary people are being treated today, I think there's a lot of lessons that we as an LGBTQ plus community clearly have learned, but as a wider society, we haven't learned from mistakes of the past. And one of the things I talk about a lot is this idea of being on the wrong or the right side of history, right? So we're going to look back, and you did this with the CEO of that company. We're going to look back and, in the 80s and the 90s, there was a lot of people on the wrong side of history because they promoted homophobia. They allowed homophobia to continue to exist. And now there's a lot of, apologies and, a statement of, well, that's just how it was. I believe at some point in the future, and unfortunately it is in the future and it's not now, the same will be said of how trans people are being treated today. Yeah. That we will look back and say it's unforgivable how society, how politicians, how companies have treated kind of the trans people within our community.
It's horrendous. I mean, honestly, I do see at some point a light at the end of the tunnel, because there was a turning point for me at one point, and I'm not sure if you remember, but soaps have a massive impact in touching the storyline because so many people watch it. And I remember, I'm not sure if you do, you probably might do remember the storyline with Syed and Christian.
I do remember it well.
Yeah, played by Mark Elliott and John Partridge. And I just remember watching that storyline and the way they tackled it. And I just remember watching it and the way the story was unfolding over the weeks and months. And I was sitting there watching my parents thinking, oh my God, this is me. This is me. I'm Muslim. Look what's happening. Look at the storyline, and everything turned out fine in the end. But to get there, what they went through, and, then you had like the first lesbian kiss on Emmerdale. Soaps have a major part to play, and they are tackling there are a lot, there are trans people on our screens now. There are non-binary people on our screens now. We now have people with disabilities on our screens now, whereas before we didn't have any of that. And as much as we are, I feel we are going, well, we did go in the right direction, but lately I feel we're going in the wrong direction. We're going backwards. A lot of countries are going far right. You've got the Trump administration, you've got Nigel Farage now winning seats. He could easily become a new government in 4 years,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing I just wanted to quickly touch on is you talked about the experience of being at school. I will use this opportunity to give a cheap plug to our mutual friend, Ollie Pike and Pop and Ollie,
Yeah.
for the incredible work they are doing. I do encourage people to go back, listen to that episode, and where you can support Ollie and the incredible team at Pop and Ollie.
It's incredible.
It's amazing what they're doing. And we will continue on the message of hope. And I would love to touch on you and your husband, Adam, and your marriage obviously had the official Attitude stamp of approval in
Yes.
2024, winning the Attitude Pride Award, which is an incredible achievement. There we
There
go.
you
Love to
go.
see it. Talk to me just about that experience and kind of going through that experience, but also kind of what it meant to you on the other side of it.
So it just felt so nice to be finally accepted in society,
And
um,
seen.
and seen. Like, I mean, I've had my struggles, as we've discussed. Adam has definitely had his struggles. Um, we've had our struggles together. I mean, as I've said, I'm half Turkish, half Palestinian. Adam is Jewish, and with the current conflict that's happening in
Yeah.
Gaza.
Yeah.
But as we know, it has been spanning for the last 77 years now. So it's nothing new, but we've had our very own challenges ourselves and we've overcome them. And, you know, um, it, so it just felt nice to finally get that green card. Go, do you know what? Here's your story.
Yeah.
Here's what you brought to the table. Here's what you're representing, and here's an award to say thank you. I mean, the team were fantastic that we worked with at Attitude. The day itself, I just remember getting the email saying that we'd been nominated for the award, and I was at work, and that was just really exciting. I called Adam, and then it kind of a bit snowballed from there. We then got invited down to their studios, and we had a whole photo shoot and a video, and then we got told on that day that, yeah, you actually have won. And we
It's
were like,
amazing.
you can't tell anyone. So we couldn't tell anyone for, you know, and as you can tell, I love to talk, but, couldn't tell anyone. And was like, Ali.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so on the actual day, it was, yeah, a really beautiful day to actually be there and to just walk into a room holding my husband's hand
Yeah.
and giving him a kiss, going up on stage. I mean, I could have killed Adam that day because we wrote a speech, and Adam and I are two very different people. I I would go out there, I would, can speak in front of hundreds of people if I needed to. Adam can do that, but it takes him a bit more time to soak it all up, if that makes sense, and get
Yeah.
that courage to. So when we went up on stage and there was the speech, so I started doing my bit, but Adam was meant to do the second bit, and he just stands there,
Okay.
doesn't say anything. So I just carried on speaking. I'm just like, what do you want me to say? Like, you've got
You got
Ryland
it.
Clark, but you got Ryland's one end, you've got Rob Rinder sat in front of you, but all the attitude, Darren Styles and everyone. And I'm just thinking, well, he's not speaking. What am I going to do? So I end up speaking
Quick
the whole
thinking.
speech. Yeah, exactly. And it was just really lovely. And since then, we we've done work with London Pride, so we were the face of London Pride, were part of that and then their magazine last year, and got invited to Pride in London, which was lovely. We've been in several wedding magazines where people are, promoting the whole, Muslim, Jewish, gay wedding. As I said, we did incorporate both the cultures, and we had a female rabbi, Adam's rabbi, he also did his bar mitzvah. when he was
Wow.
13. He tracked her down. He tracked her
Okay.
down. Rabbi Rebecca. So if anyone wants a liberal
There we go.
female rabbi, Rabbi Rebecca.
Shout out.
Yeah, so it was a really lovely day, and it just meant so much. And it just, you know, giving others that hope, giving others that hope, because it hasn't been an easy journey for neither one of us. It hasn't been easy, but we got there, and yeah, now married, nearly 2 years in. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. Let's keep the message of hope for the final question in this section. If you could give yourself, your younger self, one piece of advice, what would it be? And would that advice be different if I just said to a young LGBTQ plus person today?
I would say just to keep going, keep staying true to yourself. Um, Try and find your people and have your community, have your people there, because I didn't have that growing up. I had none of that. It was really difficult, really, really hard, and I don't think any young person should go through what I've been through, and I know it is still happening today because there are many people out there, But yeah, definitely, just never forget who you are and just follow your dreams.
We will end with our rapid fire questions,
Okay.
starting with what was the first music album you ever owned?
So I remember my mum and dad had a boutique shop when they were in the 80s, and next door to it was a vinyl record shop. And mum said, "Let's go and get your first vinyl." I thought, great. So we went to the shop, and I went straight over to Sabrina. Boys, 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 I'm looking for a good time. Boys, boys, boys,
Love
get
it.
ready for me. Is that right? That's the song,
Yeah.
right? It was Sabrina. But
Something like that.
yeah, yeah, I had a lot of that came. I had Yaz. I remember The Only Ways Up, Mel and Kim, Respectable. Yeah, it was. That was my first final in the 80s.
There we go. I love that. A bunch of millennials who are Googling vinyl very quickly to figure out what that is.
I know, yeah.
In the queer community, you've already touched on them. We love a good icon, especially a powerhouse woman. It sounds like your mum was a powerhouse woman in her own right. But we're thinking Gaga, Whitney, Britney, Cher. Who is your ultimate go-to queen?
I mean, I've seen all of them that you've just said. I mean, I lost count. I think I've lost count of about 300 concerts and over
Wow.
that I've been to. I love it. My powerhouse woman. I mean, I flip between Mariah and Celine. I mean, when you want, you got to do that.
Yeah, yeah. Gets you into it. It gets you into it for sure. What is your favorite queer TV show, movie, musical, or book?
So well, I've actually got the book here because I wanted to talk about this. I'm glad you said it. That this is called And Tango Makes Three. That's my queer book. If you haven't read
Love
it,
that.
do read it. It's a true story. It's about two male penguins based in New York Zoo who
Yes.
wants a baby. I keep seeing all these other penguins having kids, and they get a rock and sit on this rock, and they wait for this egg to hatch, but it's a rock. It doesn't hatch. So I won't give it away, but get the book. It is fantastic, honestly. Can I just kind of say my film as
Go
well?
for
And
it. Go for it.
so my film would be A Beautiful Thing. A Beautiful Thing. I remember that was like one of my first queer movies growing up watching it and it being British, and it was just really beautiful, wasn't it? It's the yeah, and yeah. I mean, TV shows. I range from. I mean, well, Queer as Folk.
Excellent.
That was one of my obviously the 90s, and that was
Yeah.
when you would be watching it, and your dad walks in, you're trying to change the channel,
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
battery's not when you're like banging the control for, and they're just like in the most seediest scene, and my dad's like, "What are you watching?"
What are
I'm
you
like, "I
watching?
don't know, it's on in the background, Dad." I had no idea what's going on. To be honest with you, who did that? Quickly changing it. So Queer as Folk. Um, Alan Carr, Change and End
Mm,
is just fantastic. If you
yeah.
haven't watched it, watch it. I mean, he kind of starts from the 70s, doesn't he? But it
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
goes, it's like so we kind of connect with it. I don't know if you've seen it, but AJ and the Queen. Have you
Love
seen
it.
AJ and the
Love
Queen?
it. Love
Oh
it. We need a
God.
season two. Just saying,
Oh, we need a
Netflix.
season two. Come on. I mean, we watched that on the plane to New York, and we didn't know what it was. And Adam was like, I've just watched an episode of AJ and the Queen. You need to watch it. So I put it on as well. And that's what we watched all the way to New York. And it was
I love
just,
that.
oh my God, AJ is
Yeah,
just, isn't she just brilliant in it? Like
it's
everybody's
amazing.
fault. It's just so funny. But honestly, don't kill me. But I've literally just finished watching it. I hadn't watched it. Heartstoppers.
Wow.
I
Yeah.
know, don't. It was
Wow.
there, and
It's
and and
amazing.
I didn't dive into it. I just kind of saw used to watch clips on it on Gogglebox, and then you kind of see bits, and you kind of think, oh, kind of. But I watched all three seasons. I want a
Yeah.
fourth. I want the
Yeah.
movie.
The movie's coming.
I cried every episode. I
Yeah, it's
cried,
beautiful.
and it was so beautifully written and so well acted by everyone. It was great.
Yeah.
And my musical, I would say, and Juliet, that was just fun. It had
Fabulous.
everything you
Yeah.
wanted in it.
Yeah.
It kept me alive. The songs, the characters, the twist in it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there
That's
you
a great
go.
one. I love that. I love that. That's amazing. And obviously, you mentioned AJ and the Queen, which gives me the perfect segue to if you had to lip sync for your life and get the
Yes.
Shantae You Stay, which I can see in the artwork behind you,
Yeah.
what song would you choose?
Well, funny enough, I did a lip sync battle when I worked in a school about 10 years ago with the head teacher, and I did Kylie, Can't Get It in My Head. It was
There we go.
simple. You know the
Yeah.
words, you know the
Yeah.
dance moves, and I wore high heels to my performance. It was for Red Nose actually, and I won. And I won. So
There we go.
Shantae, you stay, and
There
I
you go.
stayed.
Uh, if you could have one drink with any queer person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
So I would go for Miriam Markleys. She just someone who just says it how it is. She's
Yeah.
very funny.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to invite Elton John along to that drink with them, with
That'd be
us,
amazing.
because I think have the pair of them, put the world to rights, the pair of them would just be
Yeah.
brilliant. But she's definitely, she's Jewish, she's queer, she's open, and she really says it how it is. And I really do think a lot of people skirt around things, and they're too worried about saying things getting pulled up, and getting in this day and age, you can just get wiped out of a job.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just for being true to yourself. And I think she's just the type of person that would just give you two fingers and wouldn't care.
Yeah.
So
I agree.
yeah.
That's a great choice. Final question. Who in your network would you like to hear on this podcast? And what one question would you want me to ask them?
So I recently went to a stand-up comedian. So their name is Chris McAllister, and they live in Australia. So they are a trans, non-binary stand-up comedian, and they were
Okay.
recently over from Australia with their really beautiful wife Danica, and they're back again, I believe, in January 2026. So I think with the whole trans issues that are happening at the moment, Chris cleverly took that and has flipped it around and is making it more comical. So I've
Mm.
actually written a question down. So Chris has spoken about comedy being a tool for social change. How do you think humor can change hearts and minds? Is my question.
I love that. I love that. Well, I will do my very best to get them on the podcast, and that'll be the
Yes.
first question I ask them for sure. Ali, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today. Thank you so much for sharing so much of your story. It's obviously there's been challenges, but I feel like we're ending on such a sense of hope that to have gone through what you've gone through and come out incredibly happily married, such a close relationship with your mum and your husband, I just think is a really important story. So I just really appreciate you being on the podcast with me today.
Ben, thank you so much. Thank you.
Queer talker walks that